So people spend crazy amounts of money on four drives these days. It made me think, how much have I spent on this? So in this video I'll go through what it took me, what it cost me to build up my relatively standard 1994 Toyota Hilux into a capable little car that it is today. So I've been lucky enough over the last 2 years to be slowly piecing this car bit by bit. I've had the time, it wasn't my daily, so I had all the time in the world to get it done. The main goal was to buy a ute that was a capable little weekend car, something I could just turn the key and hit some of the harder tracks I can find without having to take the canopy off my N70 Hilux, because it was sort of a tourer at the time. I paid $8.5 grand for it when I first bought it off a mate. It was basically stock standard, had a few minor modifications to it, so it had a set of 33s, had just a plastic snorkel, an eBay one, I'm pretty sure of it. It's got a Chinese turbo kit, a front auto locker, and it just had a really basic 3-inch, I think it was even 4-inch suspension lift. So realistically, just for those little modifications on it, I could have left it alone and done majority of the tracks I wanted to do, but me being me, I can't leave anything alone, so I needed to muck around with it and make it mine, make it a little bit better. I brought it back to my workshop where I flexed it up on the forklift just to see what it had in it. It was a bit sad. It only had 315 mil as the highest I could raise the tines off the ground to flex it up before a wheel lifted off the ground, which in my eyes was pathetic for a 106. For anything solid axle, it was really bad. That was a must that had to be changed. So first up, I tackled the front end, suspension and steering. I read all about doing a diff push to clear the larger tyres and a high steer conversion to allow decent wheel travel and better steering. Before I knew it, I found a second-hand high steer kit on Facebook Marketplace, and I was deep into cutting the front end apart to make way for some cool stuff. So when I flexed it up for the first time on the forklift at work again, just after doing part of the front end work on it, I was just blown away with the amount that it freed the front end up. It had a huge amount more wheel travel than what it used to, with very little work. And I knew from then on, I was hooked. I knew I was deep in the game, and this build would go a little bit further than I originally thought. I ended up doing it all how I wanted the first time round. I ended up bracing the chassis. I went larger shock towers, 13.5-inch patrol rear shocks under the front, the high steer conversion, a front drop hanger. I made up some custom 80 series bump stop mounts, longer brake lines of course, rear under front leaves, banana shackles, custom front tail shaft, and a U-bolt flip kit to finish it all off. And the front end just moved like crazy, so I thought, oh, I'm screwed now. I want to make this thing sit on a 44-gallon drum. Continued on for a few weeks and got the front end finished. It was night and day with how it handled off-road. It completely blew me away that someone like me could work out how to get the front end of a Hilux to work that well just by looking at photos on Google and Facebook. So all up, the front suspension and the steering modifications cost me $2,635. So after doing just the front end work on it, I knew the rear needed work too, and in my mind I thought, how cool would it be to own a four drive that can be able to flex up on a 44-gallon drum comfortably? So at the time I worked out the aluminium tray was too light for what I wanted to do, and I wanted something with a bit more strength just in case I need to reverse over trees or smack it into a bank or just stupid things that happen off-road. So I looked on Marketplace again and actually found a bloke who was happy to swap my aluminium tray for his steel tray, just to come off an N70 Hilux, an extra cab. So I cut the mounts and modified it to suit this, gave it a fresh lick of paint, yeah, and it sits on there really nice. So after I bolted the tray on, I worked out what I needed to do for the rear. I got some IFS rear leaves off an N60 Hilux, which is the IFS variant. Basically the same leaf spring, just the tail section slightly longer, so it puts your shackle on a bit more of an angle, which gives you the ability to run a 180 to a 200mm shackle. Just makes it a little bit more comfortable, gives a little bit more flex. So I got all the pieces together, started hacking into the back. So after I put the new rear leaf springs in, I flexed it up again. It got a little bit more travel than the standard kit. I sort of wasn't happy with it, but I wheeled around a few times to sort of get the feel of it, just to see what it was capable of. It was definitely an improvement over standard. Standard was quite rough. This has made the rear feel a little bit smoother, but didn't gain a huge amount of drop. Up travel was fine, but down travel was a real issue with just the IFS rear leaves, just because they were just too short. So with the front working well beyond my expectations, but the rear lacking behind, I went back to the drawing board and done a little bit more research and worked out what I could do with the rear end. So I found the longest leaf you could possibly buy off the shelf was actually out of a Toyota Tundra. It had the same leaf spring width as the Toyota Hiluxes, surprisingly. I just had to change the front bushes, rear bushes. I gave them a reset in the press to give them a new shape. Bought some new brackets, so I was able to relocate the front spring hanger further forward. Still using my 200mm shackles. I mocked everything up, flexed it up a few times on the hoist to get my ankles right and try and work out droop and tail shaft angles and all that. Tacked it in place and knew that there was going to be a heap to gain here. Went ahead with it, ended up fitting a shock inversion bar as well. Ended up fitting 12-inch travel rear patrol shocks also. 80 series bump stops. Once again, longer brake lines. I had to extend the tail shaft, but by doing so I just bought a tail shaft spacer because I pushed the axle back a little bit. New front leaf spring mounts, the longer Toyota Tundra leaves, the 200mm shackles from the previous IFS rear leaf configuration. I ended up fitting a U-bot flip kit as well. So after doing all the rear end work with it, I managed to get it to flex up on that 44-gallon drum, which I wanted. It done that easy. So with a little bit of tweaking, resetting the leaves, a couple little tweaks here and there, I was able to get it to clear a wheelie bin. It was just stupid amount of travel for something with leaf springs. It blew me away. I was just cheering. I was so stoked. So all up, the rear suspension, it cost me $1,630 for all the parts. So after just doing the steering, front suspension, rear suspension, I was doing some crazy things with this Hilux. It was great. Taking it up tracks I wouldn't even dream of taking the old Ute up. It was eating up tracks and I was having so much fun. Everything was going well until it all went bad. So on a night run at Glass House, we were driving down a bit of a steep hill. Wasn't too bad until I dropped the front wheel into a little bit of a hole, and as it went in I dabbed the brakes, the rear kicked up and it fell over onto its side in this rut. I was incredibly lucky. It landed on the front corner of the bull bar, the headboard and the box slider. I watched the mirror fold in and touched the door and thought, I'll cave the door in for sure, but managed to get a mate who was at the top of the hill. Luckily we got a pulley block out, strapped it around my slider and managed to winch the car back onto its wheels again. Let it sit there for 10 minutes, had a bit of a look over the side, and the only damage there was on it was a small mark in the door and a little bit of paint off all the bar work, so I was incredibly lucky. Oh, and I cracked a flare, so a couple of cable ties later and that was all fixed up. So that made me think again, what can I do to make up for my lack of talent? I thought, what can I do? I'm going to make the car wider, because I've seen a few posts here and there about people talking about this wide track conversion, so I thought I'll go down the road of doing that too. So I found out that the N60 IFS rear diff housing and axles could fit right underneath the LN106s, and they're significantly wider than standard. The front was also an easy one. I got myself a set of hubs from another N70 IFS Hilux. The main difference is the hub rim flange sits further out, and all that was needed was a hub spacer to relocate the brake rotor back to its original position, now wider than standard. So the wide track conversion only cost me $800. So I'll move on to bar work. Bar work's been one of those things I sort of piece on as I go, here and there. So the first thing I got was a set of sliders. Brush bars were a must. I also went for a high clearance cross member because I was finding the stock cross member would hang too low and hook up on rocks, sticks, logs, and certain things on certain tracks. So all up, the vehicle's protection cost me $1,440. So after doing a few tracks and getting to know the ute, where it can and where it can't go, I was finding that the low range just wasn't low enough. It just didn't have the torque and the punch that I needed. So I looked down the road of either changing diff gears, going to 4.88s, or actually putting transfer case reduction gears in it. Weighed up the two, and honestly I went with transfer case gears because simply they were easier for more gain. The ute's slow to start with. Highway speed wasn't really a big issue for me as I don't daily it. Also at the time of throwing the reduction gears in it, I thought might as well make it twin lock now, so I ended up getting another rear locker, so the twin autos, front and rear, because I've had no issues at the front. I thought might as well go down that road again. It was a cheap option besides the Meg locker, which honestly did tempt me a few times. So after making all the changes and modifications, I found the ute was going some pretty crazy places now with these reduction gears and being twin locked. Really decent suspension and good controllable steering. However, now with the aid of reduction gears, was putting a huge amount more torque through the front and rear axles than what it was used to. And I found out that when I get into certain bindy situations, it was incredibly easy to break a front CV. CV. There's nothing wrong with it. Oh! Oh! Yep! Ended up breaking 3 before I had to bite the bullet and go a set of chromo CVs from Trail Gear. They're rated up to a 37-inch tyre, so I was only planning on running 33s at the time. Now it's running 35s. I'm sure I'll end up at 37s the way things are going, but at least I know I'm covered for that. So the driveline upgrades ended up costing me $2,980. So the electrics on the ute are all pretty basic. I wanted to keep the ute as simple as I could, obviously due to cost, and basically I wanted less to go wrong in the bush. So it's just got a cheap eBay set of rock lights, a few light bars here and there for night wheeling. The winch I'm running is just a cheapie from Super Centre. It's actually starting to play up. It'll only go in, it won't wind out at times. So I do have another winch at home, another Super Centre one that's failed, so I'll try and build 2 out of the good ones for now, but I'll eventually put a run of a winch in it when funds allow. So, on the rims and tyres. I've got 2 sets of tyres I run. I've got a set of Nitto trailgraplers in a 33 12.5 15 wrapped around a neg 20 steel rim, and also another set of trailgraplers in a 35 12.5 16 wrapped around a neg 25 aluminium beadlock. So instead of putting both sets of wheels up, I'll just put up the price of the tyres I usually use, which are the 35s with the beadlock rims. So those rims and tyres cost me $2,850. But that's the basics of this ute. I absolutely froth wheeling it. Like every time I turn the key, it just puts this huge smile on my face. Just because I've put in all the work myself, I know it's been done to it, I know how much effort I've put into it, and I know that's a little bit special to me just because it's something you can't buy off the shelf. Things I've learned just by simply tinkering away in the shed, learning trial and error and learning what works and what doesn't. It's been a really special little journey of mine putting this car together. Time to work out how much I've actually sunk into this old ute. So all up, all the major modifications that I've set on the camera today ended up costing me $21,145. So in all honesty, it doesn't really need all those modifications to be a really incredibly capable ute. I've just done all these things because it was my way of doing it, and I really love the build process. I've actually enjoyed putting it together and building it almost as much as wheeling it. It's been a really enjoyable thing for me, just tinkering away and just seeing how much I can improve it. This is my first real project I've tackled where I've done major suspension and steering work, where I've done a heap of welding and fabrication. It's been a huge eye-opener for me, and taking those 2 years, taking my time and sort of working out how to do things the proper way, close to proper way, has been a real good thing. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. You don't have to spend a stupid amount of money, 20 grand honestly. You don't have to blow that on a 4-drive these days. You can buy one of these a lot cheaper than 8.5. You can spend half the money on it and go pretty much anywhere you want to go. So I hope it's given you a bit of an idea on what a ute like one of these is worth to build. It sure was a bit of an eye-opener for me. I've never really known how much I spent on it. It's sort of just throwing money at it here and there over the last 2 years to try and get it to how it is, and I had absolutely no idea what I spent on it, but it's close to where I was thinking, so I'm pretty happy with the end result. Anyway, thanks for watching. Might see you out on the tracks.